Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion. Rock and metal invasion.
Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show tonight, I want to talk about the new Sammy Hagar song, Encore, Thank You, Goodnight. Now, in my last episode, I talked about the new song from Mammoth called The End, and I did a video reaction to that song. Love the song, and of course, Mammoth is the band featuring Wolfgang Van Halen. Love the music video, great stuff. In just a few days prior to that, Sammy Hagar released the song Encore, Thank You, Goodnight, and there's recently been a music video put out for that as well. So interesting coincidence that two songs come out in the same week that both have very strong links to Van Halen. Now, I'm not going to do a reaction to the music video that Sammy Hagar has just released, but I want to talk about the song, and I also want to talk about an interview that Sammy Hagar has done with Rolling Stone magazine. But first of all, the song. Wow, what a great song. Two great hard rock songs in a few days, and that doesn't happen very much, especially in recent times. But what's interesting about this song, it's inspired by a dream that Sammy Hagar has had about Eddie Van Halen, and it has prompted him to create the song that he's calling Encore, Thank You, Goodnight. And if you follow the lyrics, it's basically a thank you to Eddie for the great music that he has created. Sammy also thanks Eddie for the fame and fortune. Sammy, of course, at one time was the vocalist for Van Halen. But he wasn't the original vocalist. He took over from David Lee Roth. But things didn't work out all that well in the end between Sammy and Eddie, and in fact the Van Halen brothers. And of course the same thing happened in a way, at least initially, with Dave and the Van Halen brothers. I guess what's interesting about Sammy doing this song and being so thankful to Eddie is Sammy has said some pretty negative things about Eddie Van Halen, especially in his book, his autobiography. Now, granted, I'm sure Eddie Van Halen said some negative things about Sammy as well. But anyway, before I get into the interview, I want to talk about this great song. So you've got Joe Satriani on guitar, Michael Anthony, formerly from Van Halen, on bass, and Kenny Aronoff on drums, who took over recently from Jason Bonham. So it's a great band. And, you know, if anyone's going to try and step into the shoes of someone like Eddie Van Halen, from what I can see, it appears as though Joe Satriani is the man to do it. Now, I will admit, I'm not a big Joe Satriani fan. I'm not even really all that familiar with his music and the albums that he's put out. I mean, yeah, I've heard some stuff, but, you know, I don't know all the material. I don't know his whole discography or anything like that. I wouldn't say I'm a fan. But on this song, I think he sounds amazing, and I would really love to hear more songs like this. Now, I know it's a new song, brand new, only came out this week, but already I'm thinking this is one of Sammy Hagar's best ever songs. And it's taken an Eddie Van Halen dream to produce it. I mean, this song could be on a Van Halen album. I really think it could. And yes, okay, you couldn't call it Van Halen, but I could imagine Eddie Van Halen playing on a song like this. Now, you know, with a song like this, in an ideal world, you'd have Alex Van Halen come in on drums, you've got Sammy on vocals, you've already got Michael Anthony on bass, and yeah, either have Joe Satriani, or maybe even better, Wolfgang Van Halen come in on guitar. If you could get Wolfgang Van Halen playing guitar, Sammy Hagar on vocals, Michael Anthony on bass, and Alex Van Halen on drums, get them all together, I would have no problem with you calling that band Van Halen. Go out on tour, put out albums, it would probably be amazing. But I don't think it's going to happen. And I think the main reason it's not going to happen is due to the relationship that currently exists between Alex and Sammy. And that leads me on to this interview that Sammy has recently done with Rolling Stone magazine. Now, I'm not a Sammy guy or Dave guy. I actually like them both. But I've got to say, Sammy has said some things in this interview that tells me a few things. Firstly, things aren't looking good in regards to repairing this relationship with Alex Van Halen. In this interview, he says his message to Alex Van Halen is, just leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone. Weirdly, though, at the same time, he's not happy about not being mentioned in Alex Van Halen's recent book, Brothers, which doesn't really make much sense to me because I kind of think he is leaving you alone if he doesn't mention you in his book. Granted, that book was mainly about, the David Lee Roth years. Maybe there'll be a follow-up book and Sammy will get talked about then. Anyway, Sammy's definitely talking about Alex in this interview. He says, Al's angry because, he's out there doing it. Mike and Sammy, they're out there doing it and he can't. So he can't go out and do them. And Sammy thinks it bothers Alex that Mike and him are out there doing it, still doing it. And he says, if I was in his shoes, I would feel terrible because I couldn't do it anymore. Well, I don't think that Alex Van Halen can't necessarily do it anymore. Maybe he's just choosing not to do it anymore. Anyway, then he talks about the fact that he's actually making Alex Van Halen money because he's going out there keeping the name and the music alive by playing concerts. I don't know about that. I think the name already is out there and Van Halen probably don't really need any extra help at the moment. But yeah, still great that he's going out there performing. By the sounds of it, for his age, he still sounds pretty good. Anyway, so Sammy Hagar has had a dream about Eddie Van Halen, which inspired this new song. Great new song. But he also has had a dream about Alex Van Halen. And in this dream, he says to Alex, what are you pissed off at me about? Just tell me what the problem is. And then Alex just laughs at him and says, you don't know, do you? And Sammy says, I don't. Then Alex says, I'll flip a coin. Heads, I'll tell you. Tails, I won't. So Sammy just doesn't get it. He doesn't seem to understand why Alex would be angry with him. I'll tell you what, if he reads this Rolling Stones interview, he's not going to feel any more positive about Sammy. In the article, they then talk about, a couple of reasons why Alex might have some issues with Sammy. One of the first things they mention is that, at one time, the Van Halen brothers and Sammy had ownership of Cabo Wabo, but it was losing money, so they ended up handing it all over to Sammy, and then things changed, and he ended up making millions of dollars from it. So, maybe that's why. They also talk about, of course, as I mentioned, what Sammy wrote in his autobiography in his book. Yeah, and, I really think that could be it, because he wrote some pretty negative things about Eddie in that book. And yes, he has gone on record as saying he regrets what he wrote. And, what he wrote may have been true, but at the end of the day, perhaps it wasn't appropriate to have written those things and published those things. And this was written and published when Eddie was alive. Sammy says, supposedly, that, him and Eddie made up before Eddie passed away. And that's why I find it really interesting that he's writing songs about Eddie and talking so positively about Eddie, when I'm not sure Eddie would have felt the same way. I mean, yeah, supposedly they made up before he died, but, I don't know too much about that. But I do know what he wrote in his book. And if I was Eddie's brother, I'd be pretty pissed off as well. Now, Alex in his autobiography does actually write quite positively about David Lee Roth. So, maybe there's a chance Alex and Dave could get together. The problem is, I'm not too sure who else they'd get, because it sounds like Dave and Wolfgang don't get along. And they're probably not going to bring back Michael Anthony because, he's buddies with Sammy. Initially, they actually were going to, the idea, my understanding was, Joe Satriani was going to be brought in. But now he's with Sammy, so that probably isn't going to happen. Anyway, that's just my little take on this great new Sammy Hagar song and his interview that he's done with Rolling Stones. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure you hit the thumbs up, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you later.